Hey siblings, Maureen here. You are welcome to my YouTube channel. Here I share videos around spirituality, personal development, and of course living intentional. Every once in a while we are going to dabble into different topics. Of course, all of those topics fall under intentional living, right? On today's episode, we are dealing with what I call bold and hinges. It's basically conversations around relationship, love, marriage, and all the shenanigans that happen in between, right? So, today, I know that one of the most important questions people ask me whenever I talk about my relationship with my husband, they ask me what were the top things that I was on the lookout for that made me recognize that he was the one. So today I'm here to talk about those top 5 things with the hope and prayer that it's going to inspire you to have your own list. I know a lot of persons usually say, oh, you should not have list or something. I had a list, and of course I will explain why I had a list, because I had to know what I was looking for. I was on a unique journey with God, and there were specific things I needed for that journey, so I had to have a list. So I'm going to tell you why it was important. Why did I have a list? A couple of years ago, the truth is, based on so many pictures of marriages that I had seen, so many examples of marriage I had seen, I had a lot of questions, and these questions were linked to the fact that a lot of marriages were unhappy. A lot of persons were not happy in their marriage, and some of the things I kept seeing were discouraging. So I kept wondering, why is it that people are in marriages but then they are not happy, they are not enjoying marriage? And then when I ask and when I read, I discover that God instituted marriage, and I know that everything God instituted is good. So there has to be a mismatch somewhere. There had to be something that was going wrong. Is either human beings are not understanding marriage according to how God intended it, or something is wrong. And I knew whatever was wrong was not wrong from God's perspective. So I had to begin studying. So when my studying began, I discovered that, okay, in order for me to actually have a good marriage, it would be unwise for me to focus only on studying marriages that were failing. So I also decided to start studying marriages that were working. And in the process of studying these marriages that were working, there were a lot of things I picked up. So I decided that I was going to keep studying marriages that were working. And the more I studied them, the more I could see similarities in the ingredients and requirements that were making their marriages work. So I began to document and study more. And in studying more, it pushed me further into seeking to understand what was in the heart of God as it regards marriage. And the more I did the study, the more I could see where the disconnect between God's plan for marriage and humans' expression or humans' understanding of marriage diverged, right? So all of these things led me into deeper study, and I made a resolve that I was going to learn how to do marriage different if I was going to get married, and that was how it all began. So a couple of things I discovered about some of these marriages were that they had the God factor, and it was not just the head knowledge, it was an experiential relationship that they had with God, right, on a basic level that was at the foundation of every other area of their life, right? And then number 2, I discovered that the second factor that was important was the individual themselves who were about to get married. And then the third thing I discovered was that before we start searching for the partner, before we start letting people come into our lives, it was also important for us to understand the institution of marriage, why it was instituted, and how God intended for it to run. That's number 3. And then number 4 is when we now start talking about the other partner, why it was important for them to come, how they were going to look, who they were going to be, and all of that. So when I did these first 4 levels of study, I discovered that, okay, marriages that work do not work by accident. It had to take a lot of intentionality for it to work. So therein was where I made the decision to have a personal list, because you know when I talked about number 2, the number 2 requirement that I discovered, which was my person, the person in the marriage, not their partner, I discovered that if the marriage is going to work, it's going to be very dependent on you as a person, who you are growing to become, and who you are in God, and the relationship that you're going to have consistently ongoing with God. So on a personal level, it required that I had to put in the work of self-development, self-awareness, self-understanding, gain a lot of self-clarity. And on the journey to gaining self-clarity, I had to discover my life's purpose, what I intended to do with my life, where God was taking me to, how far I was willing to journey with God, what my life was going to look like if I actually journeyed with God, what were the yardsticks and boundaries and permissions I was going to give or put in place in order for me to live the kind of life I wanted to have in future. So the more I asked all of these questions, the more I put all of these boundaries, the more I made all of these allocations, it was clearer the kind of marriage that I wanted to have. The more the kind of marriage I wanted to have was clear to me, the kind of partner I wanted to have to do that marriage with me became clearer. The more I gained more self-awareness, it was easier for me to actually understand what marriage was about, following God's blueprint. Then it was also clear for me to understand what were the requirements that were necessary fundamentally to make marriage work. It was also clear to me at that point that marriages were unique, that in as much as there were fundamental and basic requirements that made marriages work or that were found in the different marriages, there was still the touch of uniqueness that made these marriages work. Knowing that, it was then important for me to study what were the things that made me unique, what were the things that were going to make my marriage unique, and what were the things that were going to make my partner unique, right? So all of these things were eventually what led me to creating my list. So the more I became more self-aware, the more my knowledge about the marriage institution grew. The more God began to teach me how he instituted marriage and what were the basic requirements. Then he went ahead to teach me that marriages were unique as much as individuals were unique. That everything that was happening or everything that were put together in order to make marriage work would not necessarily be the things that would be put together to make marriage work. In as much as marriage is a union of a man and a woman, right? That man and woman in each marriage equation had unique personalities, unique purposes, unique perspective, almost unique everything, and everybody brings all of that uniqueness into their marriage, right? So it was important for me to study myself uniquely, study my personality uniquely, and how all of my personalities, my perspectives, and my background was going to come together to help build my marriage. It was important for me to study my personality, study the implication my background had or still has on me. It was important for me to study the viewpoint through which I view the world. It was important for me to try to understand my life outcomes and the things I had done, or the things I knew, or the actions I had taken per time that led up to the different life outcomes that I had experienced, because all of things were going to come into play in the marriage institution. Then it was also very important for me to also pay attention to the fact that whoever I was going to be in the marriage with already had his own personalities, his own background, his own viewpoint, his own perspective about how he navigates life. He was also going to come into the marriage with his own unique decision making process, right? That would also lead up to certain outcomes. So it was important for me to pause and ask myself, if my marriage was going to work, what were the unique equations that were going to be put in place, that were very important, that we had to put in place for it to work. Everything on my list is actually very foundational, because it's upon the foundation of these things that we do everything we do in our marriage. It was upon the foundation of these things that I also envisaged how my marriage was going to be. And it's also on the foundation of these qualities that we make decisions every day part time in our marriage. You remember I talked about uniqueness. So there are certain things that you're going to see us do today in our marriage, and you're going to be wondering, why are they doing things the way they are doing them? That's because we have a foundation. We have some basic rules. We have some basic qualities that we have laid down for ourselves, and then every decision we make is just going to ride upon these things that we have decided for ourselves, right? So number one on my list is that the person had to have a personal relationship with God. I had been in church practically all my life. I had seen Christians who were in marriages, and their marriages were not exemplary at all. And I just didn't want someone who was called a Christian. I wanted someone who was a Christian and someone who had a relationship with God on a personal level. Personally, I know how having a personal relationship with God has shaped my life. I know how it has guided my life, guided my actions. I know how it has stopped me from doing a lot of things. I also know how it has moved and inspired me to do a lot of things also. So it was important for me to also extend that principle that I had and require it from the other person. So I'm not just saying the person should have a personal relationship with God. First, I'm saying that personally, I had to have a personal relationship with God before I could have the temerity. I love that word. Before I could have the temerity and audacity to ask or require that the person should also have a personal relationship with God. I believe that once we have this personal relationship with God, and that relationship is being rekindled, that intimacy is being built upon, it has the capacity to shape our lives for the better, and it also has the capacity to change how we do marriage and help us daily understand what God instituted for marriage in the first place. So number one on that list is have a personal relationship with God. In fact, I'm going to say you should have a personal and a thriving and a growing and a consistent relationship with God. So number two on my list is an understanding of purpose. So I had grown up into a life where I could see a lot of persons were living purposeless lives. And I had also seen the outcomes. I had also seen that people who did not have a sense of purpose, did not have a sense of direction, and it was going to show in every area of their life, even in their marriage. So on a personal level, I had embarked on the journey of discovering my purpose and working in purpose. So it was also very important for me to be on the lookout for someone who had an understanding of purpose, who was either on the path to discovering it or had already discovered it and was working in it. Because everything we are going to do in life is going to start with a purpose, going to start with a why, even the marriage itself. So if a person does not have a personal understanding of their purpose, they're not going to understand the purpose of marriage. In my purpose discovery journey, I discovered that my life was going to be regimented to a high degree, and it was going to be regimented to the degree of my allegiance and submission to God. And I did not want to be in a marriage with a partner who did not understand purpose, who would not understand why I will make certain decisions. I really wanted someone who understood that a lot of decisions I was going to make in life and in marriage and in a lot of ways was going to be moved and going to be carried by my understanding of purpose, right? Then that personal understanding of purpose was also going to seep into the person's personal understanding of what marriage or of what a purposeful marriage is, because I just didn't want to have a marriage for having a marriage sake. I wanted my marriage to be unique, I wanted it to be purposeful, and I wanted my marriage to serve God intentionally. So purpose was very important. So the third thing and the third principle on my list was that the person was going to have respect for women, and in extension was going to have respect for everyone, for all people, irrespective of their age, irrespective of their status, irrespective of their certification, their possession, or whatever, right? Because I had seen that a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of men have not gained a revelation about the presence of women upon the face of the earth. So they think that women were simply objects. And this is a traditional challenge. I think that our educational system has to put measures in place to retrain and reteach men the position of women. I needed anyone I was going to be with to have done this personal retraining for themselves, or maybe their mother or their father should have helped them understand that women were not just to be seen and not heard. For me, it was very important because I knew what I carried. I knew how unique I was. I knew what God had put into me. And it was important for my partner to see that. It wasn't just that they were going to see it. They were also going to support it. They were going to make allowance for it. They were also going to have to grow up to the point where they would know that in this marriage that we were entering, there are some things that God would have us do, and it's not just going to come from the mouth of the man, it was also going to come from the mouth of the wife, because we are both expressions of God, and God was going to speak and God was going to express himself through either of us. So it was very important for me to be on the lookout for a partner who respected women, who respected women's opinion. Then also having respect for other people was also important, because everyone is important to God. Therefore, everyone should be important to you, and everyone should be deserving of respect and value, simply because they are expressions of God, simply because they were creations of God, not just because of what they did or because of what they do or what they stand to gain from those people. Number 4 on my list was a strong sense of personal values and a strong sense of personal principles. A lot of times I've heard conversations where people say that people would value you to the degree that you value yourself. I understand that is also very important, but I believe that people should value you to the degree of the value that they have for themselves. So if you find anyone who is disvaluing another person, it just shows that the person does not value themselves. Because I've come to learn that every human being is a unique expression of God. We have value, we have significance, and we have worth. So because of that God gene that is in every of us, everybody deserves to be valued. So if I find a human being, a man or a woman who is disrespectful to other people, I just know that person does not value themselves so much, and it is going to show. So in the marriage, I wanted someone who had strong personal values, who saw himself as an institution, who saw himself as an entity, and that entity should have personal values. Having personal values just lets you know that everything might be acceptable, but not everything is allowed here, right? In as much as everyone is doing it doesn't mean you also have to do it. Just because the world is saying, oh, this is the way to go, it doesn't mean it's the way to go for you, right? So having a strong sense of personal value just basically means that you are self-regulated. And when I say self-regulated, it's the fact that you're regulated by the Holy Spirit who lives on the inside of you. So he prepares you to act, he prepares you to make decisions, he prepares you to live your life every day. So someone who had those strong personal values that I did not have to wind them like engines before they were going to do certain things that were required of them. I did not have to work myself to the bone for the person to see that some kind of behavior were not to be found within kings. I find that a lot of times we are, as women, I find that many times we are having to do so much work in trying to help our partners develop sense of values because the partners on their individual level did not do that work for themselves. Yes, as a woman, we can help our partners cultivate and develop more values. But the work becomes so much when, as a woman, you're the first person who has ever had a conversation with your partner about having values, right? It's going to be tedious. So for me, I did not want to, because I had done it a lot in relationships where I was the one that was introducing the need to have personal values to the person, and it was looking like I was too much of a regimented fellow, and I did not want that. So I wanted someone who had already embarked on the journey of developing some value systems for themselves. That way, when they are making decisions in our marriage, they already know that this family will have values. On an individual level, we have values. As a marriage, we have values, we have principles, and then we are going to stand by them, right? So for me, it was very important for my partner to have strong values, because life is about making decisions, right? You're going to make a lot of decisions. You're going to have to make a lot of choices. But what is going to inspire those decisions and choices you're going to make is going to be dependent on the values and the principles that you already hold. So I wouldn't want a partner who was consistently on the path of compromise. Lastly, the last thing on my list was a strong sense of humor. So I love to laugh, and I know that this life is very serious. At the same time, this life is not so serious, right? So I wanted a partner who knew how to laugh. I wanted a partner who knew how to make someone laugh. I wanted a partner who has a unique way of viewing the world. I also wanted a partner who could laugh over things that would not make an average person laugh. I had come to understand the power of laughter in happy moments and in unhappy moments. And I know that life is a ride. You're going to have pleasant experiences. You're also going to have some experiences that might not be so pleasant. But then it's going to take a lot from you to laugh when you're going through seasons. So I wanted a partner who knew how to laugh, who knew how to make me laugh, because my God has a sense of humor, right? And when I was on the lookout for that, I knew the unique ways I could tell if a person had a sense of humor. So when I eventually met the young man who eventually became my sweet husband, yes, He had a strong sense of humor, and we could talk about a lot of things and we would laugh about them. I remember when we used to chat, we met on Facebook. I'm going to tell that story very soon. So even via our chats, you could see that he had a sense of humor because he had a way of doing things, and his sense of humor was not a fake sense of humor that was just generated just because he wanted to get a woman. In fact, he wasn't even out there to get me because he didn't know I was single. He thought I was in love with someone. So we're just friends, right? But I could tell that he had this sense of humor, and it was at the foundation of how he did life, right? So when I saw that, of course, with other things I discovered about him, it just increased just increased how much I liked him as a person as our friendship grew. And then something also very important, right, to my desire for wanting someone who had a sense of humor was communication. I'm going to explain. So I had done extensive research and I had discovered that marriage is 100% communication. I know people would often say 70% communication, 30% other things, but me, I've come to understand that marriage is 100% communication, right? With your partner, you're going to have to talk a lot. You would have to communicate your opinions. You're going to have to communicate your views. You're going to have to communicate your frustrations. You're going to communicate your excitement. You're going to communicate your expectation. You're going to communicate your dissatisfaction. You're going to communicate how joyful you feel. You're going to communicate how excited you are. You're going to communicate about how loved you feel. You're going to communicate about a lot of things. And then I have seen people who were in relationships and marriages whose conversation or communication, it's always like a war zone, right? And I didn't want that for my partner. I didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for our home. I didn't want to be in a marriage where every attempt at communication is looking like each of us were looking at ourselves through the eyes of a rifle and all of that. So one way to diffuse every tension in communication is through a sense of humor. So that was very important for me. Having a sense of humor, it's not underrated. I don't know about other people, but for me and the kind of marriage that I knew I wanted to have, having a sense of humor was not something I was going to negotiate with. You know, on my list, these 5 things I mentioned were on my list of non-negotiables, right? So having a sense of humor was not something I was willing to negotiate with. I would do, if you had number 1 to number 4 on my list and you did not have a sense of humor, I just knew it would just be a knowing for me that your personal relationship with God has not really touched you. Because there's no way you're going to have a personal relationship with God and your sense of humor or the bone of sense of humor in you is not going to be developed or is not going to find expression. God laughs. And if you say you have a relationship with God and you do not learn how to laugh at things, and you do not learn how to laugh with people, and you do not learn how to even laugh when you're having a relationship with God, I just take it that your journey of personal transformation has not risen to the level where I want to do life with you long term, right? So sense of humor, very important for me. In fact, it plays a significant role in our conflict management. So, dear siblings, I know that these things I've been saying them and I've been laughing. But for me, on an individual level, I can tell you that marriage is beautiful, very beautiful. But it's going to require levels of growth, levels of maturity, levels of childlikeness. It's going to require certain levels of dying to self. And when you die to self, you give God permission to actually live through you. That way you are more spirit controlled and spirit propelled than you let your emotions, your feelings, and your personality have the upper hand. But I'm here to let you know that there are people in this life that are enjoying their marriages. There are people in this life that are enjoying their marriage. And it's not that they are faking it, they are truly enjoying their marriage. And that is one thing that I pray for you. As I come to the end of today's episode, I want to pray for you that the God of peace give you peace by all means, always. It's a promise that God made, that in your life, in your marriage, you're going to enjoy the presence of God that brings peace. I pray that your home, whether you're married, whether you're going to get married eventually, your home is going to be a house where God Himself resides. Your home is going to host the presence of God on a moment by moment basis. That when people come into your home, they will know that truly this is the house of God. They would know that God really resides in your home. I pray for you that what ails other people will not ail you. What hurts other people will not hurt you. That God is going to open your eyes, so you're going to see your partner as a unique expression of God Himself, the same way you are a unique expression of God. God is going to enlighten your eyes. God is going to give you light, so you're going to see that you and your partner are actually partners working together to build marriage according to God's plan. I pray that you enjoy every day of your life and you're going to laugh because God loves you. So before I go, I recently started doing something in every YouTube video I post in the year 2023, that I'm going to carve out a particular time and I'm going to use it as moment for shout out or moment of just announcing some of the amazing people and amazing businesses that I know. I said I was also going to recommend books, maybe recommend sermons, recommend certain things for you. But on today's episode, right, I want to recommend an amazing business because I know how it is going to, I know how this business is going to help your life. And this business is called Loom Books. You're going to see their Instagram handle here. So for every book need that you have, contact Loom Books Nigeria, and they're going to help you access different types of book for your personal development. Remember, your marriage is not going to be better than you are as a person on an individual basis. So one way you can ensure that you stay developed, you stay growing, is that you commit to self and personal development. And reading books is one of the sure ways that you can shorten that journey for yourself. So contact